Thank you so much for tuning in to our, financially speaking series in collaboration with TANG today. And I'm so glad and honored to have Rebecca Kersch, founder of TANG app, a brilliant financial technology catering towards financial inclusion in the Philippines. So before we start, thank you so much, Rebecca, for joining us. And could you give us a brief introduction about who you are and the amazing work that you're doing?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Neha. I am always thrilled to work with you and Financial Literacy Project. My name is Rebecca. I'm the founder and CEO of Fintech TANG app. I am Filipina and Dutch, so I was born in the Netherlands but went home frequently to the Philippines. My mother's from the Philippines and a lot of my family are. And I founded TANG app, particularly my inspiration behind it was my Filipina auntie. She is living in Europe right now. She's a migrant worker. She helped raise me, my brother, and my sister. So, and she sent home most of the money that she earned to support her family. And not only was her generosity and this unconditional love sort of probably the reason why I maybe even if I am at all a bit of a decent person, that probably all comes from her, but also helped me see that the financial system, unfortunately, is quite broken for people like her, migrant workers, as well as then a lot of her relatives back home who are still unbanked. So that's what drove me to start TANG app, which in a nutshell is an international peer-to-peer mobile payment app. So it allows migrant workers with a first focus on the Philippines to send money home on the TANG app, and then the receiver can use the same app to pay bills and peer-to-peer.
Oh, that's brilliant. And we worked with TANG app for a bit, and it's just such an amazing technology. And I think it's not just something which is restrictive to a country like Philippines, but definitely something which a lot of migrant workers sort of relate to, irrespective of where they come from. A lot of it is especially around emerging economies and countries where, of course, the unbanked are sort of not really have access to those kind of convenient technologies. So this is something brilliant that you're building. I'm very curious to know about how you sort of ventured into the world of finance and financial technology. How did you come up, with the idea of building TANG, and how did that happen?
Yeah, so I actually, do not have a financial background. I do not have a technology or engineering background, and so just to start with that, which I hope is also a bit of an inspiration to other non-technical, non-financial founders out there. I actually, what I cared most about was solving problems in the Philippines. That's always been my driving force. I've been very lucky and privileged to have lived a very comfortable life, to have access to financial services, to go for jobs that I want and that I love to do. And I learned very young on that in the Philippines, this inequality is vast, and it is only for a reason of being born into a different family, a different setting, and that's just why I'm lucky. And so I started with this want to have a better social impact in the Philippines. And my family started a nonprofit in the education space already about close to a decade ago now, and they've done tremendous work with this feeding program for an elementary school. And I went to the Harvard Kennedy School to do my master's, and I was during my time there thinking about what should I continue work on that? Should I join that and expand it, or should I look into other issues? And interestingly, education has improved a lot since we started that, which is great. But one problem that wasn't changing at all was financial inclusion, financial literacy, and it was one of the major contributors still to inequality and intergenerational poverty. So, so that led me to start to understand more and look more into financial inclusion, especially in the Philippines. And that's kind of where it started. And then I was selected for a fellowship, which came with a grant at Harvard. And then we were one of the winners in the Harvard President's Innovation Challenge, and sort of a lot of competition awards came from there. And so we realized, okay, with TANG app, I think we're onto something. And I think it's a solution that can help a lot of people. So it's sort of, we hit the ground running from there. And I started it officially about a year and a half ago. So it's gone really fast, really quick.
No, it's just been such a phenomenal vision, and I've actually heard your life story earlier before, but it just speaks so much about, sort of believing in dreams and then just coming up with sort of innovative solutions, irrespective of the background that you come from. So it really doesn't matter, which particular background that you are, but what's important is that it's a problem that worth solving, and then sort of
Mhm.
finding ways to, solve that problem. So yeah, so this has just been such an amazing, sort of journey of yours. What I'm very curious to know, and I think a lot of our listeners and watchers, people, viewers are students who are sort of interested in fintech, and they are those kind of individuals looking for these kind of opportunities. So you've been in the space for almost a year and a half, and it's fast growing. It's sort of picked up pace with the way COVID has impacted, and a lot of other technologies have been hit by COVID. But what we've noticed is that fintech has sort of like been embraced a little bit better because people are now accepting newer technologies. So what are your key takeaways for people from that background, like looking for newer fintech applications, and what are the other sort of forms within fintech that you see are going to catch up in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so I think it's so in the Philippines, 70% are unbanked, and it's a predominantly cash-heavy country. And so what we've seen with COVID now is e-payments have increased, debit and credit card have been usage and requests have increased. So it's a really interesting phenomenon with the pandemic, which is hard on the world and on everyone, to see how that is driving financial inclusion, interestingly. And so that's certainly very exciting. But I also think that what's really important, especially in finance and technology today, is that we use that positive momentum in a helpful way. So I think it can be very exciting to keep rolling out products and seeing whether this new group of people potentially using digital apps now for finance as opposed to when they were using cash, that we are still cautious of, just because these numbers are increasing, the financial literacy hasn't suddenly come to exist. And so I am very excited about other technologies, but I think what's more important is, as financial technology companies and for the central banks and emerging markets and other regulators, it's much more important that we make sure that the financial literacy that goes among it grows at the same time, and that we don't just slack off on, oh my gosh, we now can get a bunch of users.
Yeah.
If they don't understand this properly, then we will have failed at our mission, because financial inclusion without understanding why finance matters is a hollow goal. So I think that's what matters more. And I think the metaphor we always use at TANG app is, when the world moved from home landline phones to mobile phones, emerging markets went straight to mobile phones. They did not have home landlines. And with banking, we see the same opportunity. So there's 1.7 billion people unbanked globally. Most of them have smartphones today, or at least in a lot of countries, it's getting to most of them having smartphones. They can go straight to digital banking and digital payments. I don't see why they would need a checking account from like a brick and mortar bank anymore. But having said that, there were a lot of lessons learned in emerging markets when they went straight to mobile phones. It's understanding, how phone credit works, and that people were spending way too much of their personal money on phone credit because then they just wanted data all the time. And so understanding those trade-offs, it's exact same with finance. It's an amazing opportunity, but to be cautious on making sure that the people using our products are growing right along with us. And that's sort of, a big priority with TANG app as well.
Oh, that's such a beautiful message, I think, for all our viewers, because that is what, we keep telling people from time to time. There's been this overload of financial technology within India as well. And a lot of it is more about freebies that are just being spread across people. And this encouragement to sort of adapt and sort of, get more people into it. And a lot of it is, of course, driven by the kind of funding that has come. But it's also important because for it to become more sustainable in the long run, it's important that people understand the product that they're using. So this is such a brilliant vision. Do you see sort of TANG app expanding to other geographies as well in the coming years? Do you envision something like that?
Absolutely. I think that the concept can be applied to a lot of countries. The four largest remittance markets in the world are India, China, Mexico, and the Philippines. And so, and they very similarly have unbanked populations still, unfortunately. So it's very interesting for us, obviously, to apply what we're doing in the Philippines later. Having said that, I have a lot to do right now, as you know, Neha, building a venture is a lot of work. So
Yeah.
we're taking at a time, but I would absolutely, our vision is at one point to be the international peer-to-peer transaction app for the unbanked, and I don't see why that isn't possible. So yeah, maybe we'll do this again in a few years and see where we stand.
No, I absolutely, agree with you. And the reason why I asked is, I have this vision of like, one day, like, problems which are solving like global problems, which are not just restrictive to one geography, but just sort of catering to a larger audience. And that was such a beautiful way to sort of put it. As we sort of come to a close, Rebecca, what is it that, has inspired you? What is this one book or a quote or anything that you've sort of come across? And a lot of learning, I think, as a startup entrepreneur comes from the failures that we have. So what goes on social media usually is the accomplishments, and before those accomplishments, a lot of times there's rejection. So like from an example that we recently got rejected from a bunch of incubator programs, and then we thought, are we doing this right? And then all of a sudden something happens which makes you think, no, this is something worth doing. So have you sort of encountered that, and what is that one inspiration that keeps you going?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think I always think about founding a venture like Tang App has been, for me, I feel so privileged I get to do that. It's been the toughest job by far. I've worked as a strategy consultant, worked in a nonprofit, multiple experiences. This is the toughest one by far, but it's also the best. And I feel very lucky I get to do a job I love, even when it's tough at times. You deal with rejection every day, and I had to learn a different way of coping with that. So going with you'll get 9 no's, but you'll get 1 yes, and the 1 yes is that matters. So instead of with every no, not wanting to get up out of bed anymore, because I'm pretty sure you're brilliant and you've always been the best and brightest person in whatever environment, and so these no's are hard on people like us. And so I've switched my mindset on, great, another no, I'm 1 more down to get to that 1 yes. So it's a complete mind shift, not taking things too personally. And I think a quote that also drives me is, it's actually Adam Smith, and he wrote in The Wealth of Nations that how selfish soever a man may be supposed, man or woman, there are evidently some principles in their nature which interest him in the fortune of others and render their happiness necessary to him, but he derives nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it. Now, a super long, winding quote, what it basically means is man and woman, I like to say, are inherently good. And I think that, especially for being in finance, we very much believe in finance for good, not for evil. And it exists. It's just about the people and the team behind it. And that quote has sort of stuck with me all throughout my education, because there are moments where, especially building a venture, you will start wondering whether people also care as much as you, or do they care about the social mission, or do people only care about returns or smart investments or making money? And I think that's been more naturally linked to people in the finance world, but I have also seen a lot of people go above and beyond for Tang App for no reason. And so I do believe people are inherently good, and that to me is my North Star. Perhaps a bit delusional at times. I am cautious, and I do my due diligence on partners, but considering one of our big mottos is finance for good, not for evil, that's one that has inspired me throughout this journey.
That is such a wonderful thought. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for your time and for sharing this beautiful vision. And I sort of, I hope and pray that of course Tang App comes to India, like, whenever it does, and for all the success with Tang App and the brilliant things that you're doing and sort of building and catering to this amazing audience, I think, which benefits at the end of the day. So a huge congratulations for your journey so far, and I wish you all the very best. And thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you once again and wish you all the best.
No problem, Neha. Anytime. Thank you for having me.